Wow, welcome. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to all the organizers. This is a very special morning that we have here at City Hall, honoring Jan Scruggs. Thank you so much for all of you being here and, of course, all of your service. We're going to hear from Judge Munley and Mayor Wenzel today before we present a key to the city. So.
All right, I'll say a few words. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for doing this. I want to say I'm so honored to be with Jan Scruggs. Jan's my friend. I met Jan before a couple of years ago through Manny Santayana, who's a hero himself. I just want to say this about Manny. He went to Vietnam on his own to get the dog tags from soldiers who were lost in action. He picked up piles of dog tags and returned them to families. He flew there himself and did that himself. And I mean that, Manny. That's a big deal for me. And Joe Ricardo, thank you for everything. And I want to thank Bob Rand for walking me up here because I have trouble walking this far from the courthouse. But anyway, veterans, thank you so much. Let me tell you one thing about Jan Scruggs. I finally met Jan Scruggs several years ago through Manny Santayana. We went to Washington together. And Jan Scruggs is such an unassuming guy. Now think about this, folks. We would not have that Vietnam memorial, that Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., had it not been for Jan Scruggs. He started the whole thing. He helped raise the money. He got it started. I remember seeing Jan Scruggs on television, on CBS, NBC, ABC, with senators, Congress people, Congress members of Congress, and he's always an unassuming guy. When Manny Santayana and I went to Washington with Jan Scruggs a couple of years ago, right, Manny? There were senators there, congressmen there, cabinet members there. The hero of the dinner was Jan Scruggs, but he's unassuming. That's the way Jan is. And I met his beautiful wife and everything. We had a nice couple days, didn't we, Manny? We did. And Jan, you're really a hero to me. I really mean that. I love Jan. I call him on the phone all the time. Sometimes he calls me back, sometimes he doesn't. But he's a busy guy. What are you going to do? But I want to thank you, Jan. I love you for everything you did. And and David Wenzel is a hero to me too. Yeah. David?
Mayor Wenzel, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, just that it's always good to be back to City Hall. It's better if you're elected back to the City Hall. But we're happy to be here with the veterans. As a young man, I was injured over in Vietnam, and I've always kept in touch with a lot of people that I knew who were either over in Vietnam or back here in the United States who were in military. And Jan Scruggs, for what he did to be able to start the ball rolling with the monument down in Washington, D.C., brought a lot of our veterans that came back from Vietnam, gave us a better feeling about ourselves once that Veterans Memorial was dedicated a number of years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Well, I have a hard time expressing the gratitude that I feel for this day, and I really appreciate the leadership of the city and the veterans groups, and you're so lucky to have Mayor Cognetti here. She rose to the occasion, and as we're facing these troubled times with coronavirus and everything like that, it's nice to know we have people who are getting things organized and helping us out. I began the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I became an expert on post-traumatic stress disorder. I had served in Vietnam. I was wounded there and testified in front of the Senate. So I had some credibility. And in 1979, I decided I would just get this memorial built. And I did it in 3 years. But that's because we got a lot of people who are very talented involved in our team. Nothing like this will ever happen again in Washington. They changed all the rules. But this is a real opportunity for me because I want to thank Judge Munley and Manny Santayana, the mayor, everybody here from the VFW for being here today. And I have the opportunity as well On behalf of the Congress and the President of the United States, I'm part of the Vietnam War Commemoration Commission at the Pentagon, and we have pins for the Vietnam veterans. I'll be passing them out after this. And I can't thank you enough. Scranton, it's just always been one of my favorite places because you've got all these great restaurants real close to each other. You don't have to drive anywhere or stay at a nice hotel. And, within 20, 30 minutes, you're in the wilderness areas, beautiful lakes and rivers and mountains. I mean, this is really an exceptional place. And I'm very proud and honored to be a part of this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.
Well, in addition to all of your other accomplishments, it sounds like you could be the salesperson for Scranton. So if you'd like to work for the city and go out on the road with me, that would be great. Well, I personally want to thank you. And my mother, who you met earlier, I was hoping you could go say a few words to her after this. So we had her best friend's brother is still missing in action. And I lived in DC for 7 years, and I used to run on the mall. And when I could get from the hill down to the mall and still have my breath, I would go and touch Vic's name.
Interesting.
And so thank you I know personally how much it means to everyone who has somebody sadly on that wall. And so deeply appreciate that you were the catalyst for that. So it's incredible. So it truly is an honor to present this proclamation to you, and then we'll save the key for last. So I'm going to read this to you. It's a little bit long. A proclamation honoring Jan Scruggs. Whereas Jan Scruggs served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, completing a tour of duty from 1969 to 1970, for which he received the Purple Heart from wounds suffered in combat, as well as an award for valor under enemy fire. And whereas Jan Scruggs founded the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, which in 1982 built the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas in 1983, Jan Scruggs received the Samuel S. Beard Award for outstanding public service by an individual 35 years or younger. And whereas in 2015, Jan Scruggs was appointed chairman of the Select Service National Appeals Board by the United States, or the President of the United States. And whereas Jan Scruggs has received numerous other commendations and awards, both for his efforts to preserve the memory of his fallen comrades and for his contributions that helped our nation heal after a long, controversial war. And whereas the Vietnam Veterans Memorial lists the names of 58,220 service members who made the ultimate sacrifice in the war, including 55 members from Lackawanna County, one of whom, Second Lieutenant Carol Ann Elizabeth Josba, is among only 8 nurses listed on the wall. Therefore, be it resolved that Wednesday, March 11th, 2020 is declared Jan Scruggs Day in the city of Scranton. I think that Judge Munley should do the honors here.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you. Well, presented to Jan Scruggs by Paige Cognetti, Mayor, in recognition of your exceptional efforts that led to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Your tireless advocacy helped to heal a divided nation. Presented on behalf of the men and women from Scranton who served in the Vietnam War, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice. March 11th, 2020, this is presented to you. Paige Cognetti asked me to do it, our wonderful mayor. Thank you, Mayor, to Jan Scruggs.
Thank you very much.
And today is a really special day, right, Jan?
It's Jan, go on, tell him. It's Jan's birthday.
I turned 70 years old today, so this is a pretty extraordinary event. It's worth pointing out that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial gets 5 million visitors a year. And
Can you imagine?
yeah, it's extraordinary. And I'm very much I'm involved with the Global War on Terror Memorial in Washington. We're going to build one for the guys and the women fighting in these most recent wars. And I'm very much involved with the World War II Memorial. And I'm very much involved in enjoying myself being retired, too. So,
I just wanted, as I said before, when Jan Scruggs, Mayor, I swear, we were in Washington with Manny Santillan, and I'm telling you, Jan Scruggs was the hero of the whole dinner. Like, it wasn't the senators, Congress people, it was Jan Scruggs. So that's what kind of guy he is. All right.
Thank you. Let's.
I have 2 things just real quick. Jan was a consultant on our very own statue dedicated to Second Lieutenant Drozba. And
Yeah.
I know that you played a role in that. And then the last thing, let's have a round of applause from the guys from VFW Post 25.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. The VFW guys show up for every event that I have, Jan. I want you to know they're always there. I mean that.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. If we could just get a photo of all of us together, if Megan, if you could come up and make sure. This is a very special day. So thank you, and thank you especially to you. Really, thank you. Truly appreciate you. Thank you. And happy birthday.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring it in a little bit. All right. You're good? Okay.
My name is Tom Munley. I'm a judge in Lackawanna County. David Wenzel is the former mayor of the city of Scranton. Jan Scruggs is one of our biggest heroes. He started this whole idea of having the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., which gets 4 million people a year now, or 5 million people a year that come to see this wall. I've been there 20 times already. David's been there. We've all been there. What we have in common is we're all Vietnam veterans. And Jan, I want to tell you, meeting you through Manny Santillana was one of the biggest thrills of my life. So Jan Scruggs, welcome to Scranton. For ECTV purposes, I want to say, right, David? He just got the key to the city of Scranton.
That's true.
And he deserves it, David.
He certainly does. And Jan, we welcome you to the city of Scranton. You've already talked to the mayor and received the greetings and everything. And one of the things if our readers would like to know is where did the idea come from? How did it first evolve?
In 1976, I was in graduate school and began studying the military veterans of the Vietnam War, because something known as post-traumatic stress disorder, a very big disease that people have, who are coming back from Iraq, who survived car accidents, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I became sort of an expert on it, testified in front of Congress, wrote a couple articles for the Washington Post and other publications. So I had some credibility. But then I had the idea that why don't we build a national memorial? The memorial would have the names of the casualties on it. So these veterans and the family members who were hurt so badly from this terrible war would have a place to go to where they could touch the name. So that was a theory behind it, and I started in 1979, had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. But everything we do in life that's big, we need a team. We need guys like you, and I found a team of Vietnam veterans who had been to West Point and then had been to the Harvard Business School. So basically, we did this like a Harvard Business School project, and goals, objective, timeline, and we got the memorial built in 3 years.
There's about 58,000 names on the wall, roughly. Is that the amount? Do you know?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. But when they find the remains of another a soldier who might have been killed in Vietnam, and they do that from time to time, how do you get his name on, or where does his name appear, or does it go on the wall?
Yes, those who are missing in action are on the wall, and they have a little cross next to their name. It's kind of a plus mark. And so when we get the remains back, we put a diamond through the cross, and that shows that he was missing and has been returned. Yeah, so we kind of thought of everything.
Do you know how many have been missing and have returned, as far as that number? Or even just how many
Over 250.
Is it really so far?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
We have the U.S. military has an office in Hanoi, Vietnam, and they go to places where planes crashed or there were major battles and try to find the relics and bones of American troops.
Every time I go to Washington, D.C., you go to Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and you always go to the Vietnam Memorial that Jan Scruggs started. That's the big deal about this. I talk to people, thousands of people all over the country. They said, if I go to Washington, I'm going to the Vietnam Memorial, the wall in Vietnam. And we're sitting here talking to the person who started it, David Wenzel.
That's amazing.
And I want to thank Mayor Page Cognetti, by the way, for giving Jan Scruggs the key to this city, and he deserves it.
Definitely, yes, yes. As the mayor, I used to give the key to the city to visiting people and everything, and I feel she's kind of jumped the gun on me and everything. I would have loved to give this to you, too.
Jan, I asked Mayor Wenzel when he was mayor if I could have the key to this city. He said absolutely not.
That's exactly right. Even though he did. He has quite a story of himself as far as being wounded and coming back to the United States and all. Yes.
Well, no, I wasn't wounded, but I'll tell you what, I had a lot of problems in Vietnam because of all the actual infantry. You know what that's like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but here's what I want to say too. But luckily, I came out okay, just like we all did. David Wenzel ended up the mayor of Scranton. I am so proud of David too.
Yeah.
Think of David with all his injuries. He ended up running for mayor of Scranton. He won. I mean, you have to be proud of him for that.
Yeah.
He's just an amazing man. And Jan, David asked you a great question, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but he asked you a great question. How did you get that idea? Who would ever think like that somebody can get a wall started, a Vietnam wall like that, if you're not a U.S. senator or if you're not in the president's cabinet? Just a regular soldier who came back from Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, we assembled a team ultimately. We had some initial failures, but basically the idea of a memorial with names began to resonate with people. It seemed to make sense. And so we had the largest design competition held in the history of civilization at the time. 1,492, over 1,400 designs were put in. The winning design was from a woman named Maya Ying-Lin, who was at Yale University, 21 years old at the time, and it was absolutely unique, fantastic, brilliant, avant-garde, too avant-garde for many people, and there became this raging national controversy. It was on network television in 60 Minutes, and ultimately, with the opponents, they felt we needed a more traditional approach. So what we did was we put up the three servicemen statue at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which is the traditional element. They interact together. Later on was placed the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which was in 1994, I believe. And after that, there's now a plaque on the grounds of the Vietnam Wall commemorating the veterans who died from Agent Orange and from suicide because of their service in Vietnam.
Now, there's also, you can go on the internet and type into, put in the name of the wall and then put in the name of the person, and you'll be able to get a little bit of a biography, or at least what's written on the wall. Isn't that so?
Yes, that's correct. And if you're a military veteran, you can also put a date in, like whatever, July 2nd, 1969, and you can see all the casualties from that date. Mm-hmm. So if you were in a battle, it'll kind of bring back the memories. So what that does is you're a military veteran, you saw people die in Vietnam, unfortunately, and but then all of a sudden you see their name, and for many people it brings them peace, because they can touch the name and say, well, at least he's being remembered here on the mall, next to the Lincoln Memorial and Washington Monument. This is a beautiful thing. So it's good.
David and Jan, a lot of people, they get paper and they trace the name of the person who was on the wall. I think it's 58,200 and some people that are on that wall. And they trace the name and then they take it home. And another thing I noticed, a lot of people, when they go to that wall, they're crying. I remember going there right after Jan had it built, and the people were flooding the place, and a lot of people were just standing there crying because of the family members that they lost. Jan, what you did is an amazing thing. It really is. I mean, I'll be honest, I would never think of it. And I remember watching Jan on television right around this time as a young Vietnam veteran, and I'm thinking, my goodness, what a job this guy has to do to get this. Raise the money. It had to cost millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know what it cost, but I'm sure it cost millions.
Well, raising the money was the easiest part of it. It was $8.8 million. Most of it came from direct mail donors. We had letters going out from a guy named Bob Hope and William Westmoreland, Rocky Blyer from Pennsylvania, and the public spent money in. Major corporations gave us money. Veterans groups, the VFW, gave us $250,000 and a lot of other support. So the political battles were the only thing that threatened this project. There's a great book that came out recently called A Rift in the Earth by James Reston Jr., and it talks about the politics that took place to derail the memorial, in part because of the racism, really, against Asian American woman, Maya Ying-lin. And, but basically, this was a non-traditional memorial, and it was too avant-garde, and the people who were against it had a very compelling campaign. So that's exactly what transpired. But we won, everybody's happy now, and the memorial is now 37 years old. And I'm 70 today.
Happy birthday, Jan Scruggs. And I want to say this. When Joe Ricardo and Manny Santagana set this up for today, for Jan to get the key to the city, I'm sure, I was so happy, Dave Wenzel, you're part of it, because you are Scranton yourself. And it was an amazing thing, and I want to thank Paige Cognetti for taking the time to do that. But Jan, we don't get we don't get people like Jan Scruggs into the city who are real Vietnam heroes.
That's true. Yeah, and I had a quick story to tell you too. I know what they did was to upgrade where you can go on the internet and you find out a little bit of a biography of all the people who were on the wall. I went on board, or I called up the number, and I mentioned about a soldier who I knew over there, a staff sergeant, who was killed. And I just put it in, and I just made a little comment that this gentleman was one terrific soldier, and I miss him very, very much. And I received a telephone call from his son, who never had seen him. He was born while his his father was over in Vietnam. He never knew anything about his father. I talked to him for maybe about 25 minutes about how I knew his father over there, and it was one of the most fulfilling things I ever had. I can imagine what other people do the same thing, and are able to make those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, the internet can be a wonderful thing, connecting people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
Gentlemen, we're out of time, and I want to say, David Wenzel, and thank you, and Jan Scruggs, thank you so much. We're so proud that you came to the city of Scranton.
And this is for you.
Oh, thank you, Jan.
The book I wrote, I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And ECTV, thanks for putting us on the air. This is an important day for all Vietnam veterans.